Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tennyson E Stead, writer and director of Quantum Theory, founding member of 8-Sided Films. Today, I thought I would just go down my list of top 10 movies, which fluctuates a little bit as time goes on. So this is kind of where we are today in terms of, my 10 desert island must-have films. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't necessarily think that a filmmaker's creative influences have the same level of impact as the stuff that you rehearse. So probably my biggest creative influences are William Shakespeare and Tom Stoppard and a handful of other playwrights. And I'm going to talk about playwriting on a different plot, but it is something filmmakers always end up discussing with each other. And there are a lot of movies that I love, and certainly my taste in film has an impact on the movies I like making the most, so I thought I would take a little minute just to go through my list. And I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. So the first one is 2001, and I had a VHS copy of 2001 that I wore clean out when I was 5. I started watching it, and I just kept on watching it as I got older. And I think the thing that I loved about it when I was little was that, to me, at the time, the characters seemed so real that everything in the movie became plausible. And as I got older, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that it's structured like any Bible epic. It's sort of done in vignettes where these characters come in and contribute to a much larger picture. And unlike a lot of Bible epics, there's a through line of action that connects the whole thing, which is really humanity's evolution. Everybody's working together to try and take the species to the next step, and it's about all the chains of action that accomplish that. And that's frankly really subtle work dramatically and really difficult to achieve, so you've got to respect the movie on that level, as well as obviously its technical achievements. But I love how it's structured like a Bible epic. It's structured like the Ten Commandments, except it's broken up by pieces of human achievement, and it's broken up by sort of levels of awareness that we have about the world around us, which is the thing that science is built to cultivate. So I like all of those things, and I still love the characters, and they still seem very honest to me. And I love the scene in the spaceship where they're flying over the moon and they're eating the sandwiches. I like the sandwiches. So, 2001. Autumn Sonata is a movie I saw right as I was leaving college, and it struck me as so true about my family relationships. It was brutal. It was one of the first movies that really hurt me personally and made me vulnerable in ways that I wasn't prepared for. I would say the first movie that did that was Trainspotting, but man, Autumn Sonata did it in a much more subtle context, and it gave me a lifelong appreciation for Ingmar Bergman, and it's the only movie that Ingmar Bergman and Ingrid Bergman made together, and also Liv Ullmann's one of my favorite actors on the planet, and she's in it. She does a fantastic job, and it's one of her most vulnerable, most screwed up performances ever. And the movie's basically about a war between a mother and a daughter, where both of them are blaming each other for all of the hardships and all of the troubles that they've had over the course of their lives. And the mom is visiting the daughter in Sweden because of a funeral, and the two of them sort of set the table for this, to get the other one to admit that it's their fault. And neither of them is willing to do it, and it just erupts into vengeful, pitiful fighting that destroys the both of them forever. And that reminds me of home. So Autumn Sonata. The Martian is one of my all-time favorite movies, and easily my favorite movie from Ridley Scott, and he's made some wonderful movies, so that's saying a lot. And I love Matt Damon, and it's obviously exactly the performance Matt Damon was born to give at this particular stage in his career. You know, everybody, and I love Chiwetel Ejiofor, and he's magnificent in the movie. Everybody's fully committed to the action, and when I was young, I grew up corresponding with members of the space program. I went to space camp numerous times, and I got myself into Phillips Andover Academy as a young man on a science scholarship. I was dead sure I was going to be the first man on Mars. And then I started taking physics classes, and it all fell apart. But one of the things that I retained from my very early experience with NASA culture is the sense that we are all personally responsible for the success of the mission. That's something I think I bring to my filmmaking every day. I only work with people who feel the same way about a project, and that level of personal accountability, that level of, there's a million moving parts in this thing, and each and every one of them has to be perfect, and the person who contributes a part that isn't is betraying the whole and betraying all the work that everybody else has done and putting people in danger and disrupting what could be one of the most important endeavors in human achievement. So, you know, that to me, that level of accountability, of making sure I'm bringing this part and I'm going to help everybody else integrate this, and I'm going to make sure that it works better than anyone thought it could so that everybody else's work is elevated. That's obviously what The Martian is about. And it makes me happy to watch it. It makes me really happy to watch it. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. My favorite playwright is Tom Stoppard. I look forward to eventually crossing paths with him in Hollywood. I have no idea what kind of person he'll actually be. And the man's got such a acute, painful grasp of interpersonal conflict and the way that people grapple with each other that I have to imagine, you know, there's a level of contentiousness in every single interaction he has, and I don't know, I salivate to think about it. I think he's got to be fun and engaging and, you know, interesting and, you know, probably pretty acerbic. And Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is one of his most whimsical plays, and the only thing he ever directed as a film. And for those who don't know, it was the breakout performance for both Tim Roth and Gary Oldman, who I've had the pleasure of working with, Mr. Oldman, and he's a magnificent person. And Gary, I don't even know if I fanboyed all over you over Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, but if you're watching this video, it's one of my favorite movies. And man, the other thing is Richard Dreyfuss is the player. So the story's about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern sort of getting sucked into the story of Hamlet and having to navigate it and try and spare themselves from their fate. And they fail, of course, because it's written. But it's about how these characters interact when the play isn't looking. You know what I mean? And the great thing about the movie over the play is that it really freed up the actors, and it really freed up Tom Stoppard as well to bring extra definition to these characters through, I don't want to say more subtle physical actions, but certainly more well-defined physical actions, because you're not seeing it across an audience. You're right there with them, so they can do things that are a little more difficult to detect from the back row. And as a result, the characters of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern get much more clearly defined and much more specific in their actions than they do in the play. And it's a delight watching these actors work together. The script is delightful nonsense and one of the most fun things that Tom Stoppard's ever done, and any theater nerd knows it and loves it, and there's a reason why we all like to do it, because it's super fun. And I don't know if anybody's ever had as much fun as Richard Dreyfuss in that show. So that's a good one. Robocop is the first time I ever felt like an audience member, and I felt like somebody made a movie for me. I remember watching it. My mom used to make sculptures out of found objects, and she did most of her junk sculpture seeking at these massive, either flea markets or like salvage yards. And there was this big metropolitan salvage yard, either in Rhode Island or Connecticut. I think it might have been in New Haven, but we went down for a weekend of basically rummaging through piles of old street lights and stop signs and just all kinds of, municipal salvage. And we stayed in a hotel. and it was one of those hotels with the little box on the, back in the 80s when you wanted to watch a movie in a hotel, they had like 6 movies, and you would press the button and it would send a bill to your account, and it would unlock a channel, but the movie was only playing on that channel when it was playing. So you would unlock the channel, you could watch that movie, and then it would reset when the movie was over. Every time I walked in the room, I turned on Robocop. Just turned it right on. Every single time. And man, my mom must have paid like an extra $200 for that hotel room because of all the time. Every time I was in that room, I wanted to watch it. And I remember before that, my babysitter had told me she was going to take me to see Robocop, and then she found out it was rated R, and she found out it was not going to happen, so she took me to see La Bamba, and I was so disappointed. I hadn't seen a trailer, she just told me what the movie was about, and I was like, oh, I have to watch it. And then finally I was at the hotel, and I'm like, they have Robocop, I'm going to put it on. Man, it was great. I'd never seen anything like it. Neither had anybody else. And I don't know, Paul Verhoeven made a friend for life in me with that movie, for sure. Last year, I saw Hail Caesar in the movie theater, and I laughed all the way through it. I laughed so loud. I was at the ArcLight. I was at the Dome, and I did not know if they were going to let me stay. I thought maybe not sure it was going to come and take me away, because I was laughing so hard. I was there with Gerard Marzilli, and he thought it was pretty hilarious too. And the thing that was great about it was that the Coen brothers have this profound love for cinema and for performing arts and for the people who work in these fields, and at the same time they're not afraid to razz people about the inconsistencies and the idiosyncrasies that kind of define our work. So, you know, unlike some other satires about the film industry, there was actually nothing cynical about Hail Caesar, even though it was highly critical. You know, it wasn't critical in a way that implied disdain or what's the word I'm looking for. It wasn't resentful at all. It was just, you know, it was just joyful and at the same time self-aware of the character flaws that so many of us exhibit. And as a result, you know, most of the trouble that these extremely complicated characters were getting into was in fact very innocent and a direct result of all the time and all the effort that they've put into their craft, and in fact, in weird ways, a reflection of their excellence. And man, that's how you get me. That's right. That to me is entertainment when we're at our best. And there's this amazing scene at the end where Josh Brolin is explaining to George Clooney what makes entertainment great, and he's slapping the shit out of him, and I kind of want to memorize that monologue, including the blocking. So that's one of my favorites. City Lights is a movie, for those who don't know, by Charlie Chaplin. It was one of the last silent films ever made, and it was made when talkies were already becoming a thing, and undisputably one of the greatest silent films ever made. And what I love about it is how Charlie clearly had his hands all over it, not because he was a megalomaniac, although perhaps he was, I don't know, but that's not why he did that with the movie. He did it with the movie because the show clearly needed the work from him. And the great thing about City Lights is it's a classic example of do the production you have. Make the show that you have. Don't try to make the show something it's not. Use all the resources you have to put on the best show that showcases those resources. But don't try to overextend yourself. Don't try to make something bigger or funnier than what's right in front of you. City Lights is profoundly sad, and at the same time it's profoundly funny. And it's a very simple, contained little story about a homeless guy who's falling in love with a flower girl, and he wants to help her get an eye operation so she can see, because she's blind, and then she sees him and it's not gonna work. So it's, you know, there's this rich billionaire which the tramp ends up bleaching all this money off of, and you know, it's silly and it goes all over town, but it stays within its own little corner, because Charlie's got certain abilities and he wants to play the tramp, and he's got a group of actors that can do certain things, and he sticks with it. And then at the same time, he does whatever that show requires to make it as excellent as it can possibly be. He makes not the biggest show, but the best show. And in doing so, he created one of the greatest films of all time. And to me, that's the perfect example of how everybody should approach their craft. Pretty classic. I love the Avengers, and specifically, I love the first one the best. I love the cast that they've built. I think it's the best thing Joss Whedon's done, and he's done some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. You know, I loved Thor, and I loved Iron Man, and I love the way the characters are coming together, and I love how it took those characters and advanced their story, and I love all the great stuff that Tom Hiddleston got to do in that movie, and it just seemed like Joss Whedon was very intent on taking a group of actors who had already defined an entire genre of cinema and challenged them to simultaneously step up the stakes of their work, and at the same time the joy that they take from it. And I think he achieved that. That's inspiring to me. It's great to watch people do that. District 9, just couldn't believe what I was watching when I saw it. I could not believe that somebody had made a movie I would so desperately have wanted to make so much better than I would have made it. I was thrilled that it came from independent cinema. I was thrilled, obviously, by all the Robocop sort of allusions and the story of, I forget his name, Vanderweer? The story of the main character, Charlton Copley's character, is just fascinating to me, and it's perfect because he's so ill-equipped to accomplish anything. This person is a total wreck, and he's suddenly responsible for bringing to light all of the travesties that are happening in his culture. He's caught right in the middle of it, and his only way out is to deal with it all head on and expose it for what it is. And he kind of fails in that regard. But I think it's a noble failure, and at the same time he succeeds in other things, and that is complicated, and I love it. I love it. It's also one of the best improv movies ever made, undisputably. So many people try to do improv work, and probably a big part of the reason they fail so consistently is because their casts are so large, and Neil Blomkamp very wisely kept his shots contained and his cast contained, and kept dealing with the same actors again and again and again, and really produced a fantastic piece of filmmaking that I think probably helped define that whole decade of cinema. So I love it. 2009 was a big year for science fiction too. And then lastly, Solaris, which, and now I'm speaking about the Tarkovsky, the Russian version, which people look at as one of the snootiest pieces of filmmaking a person can claim to enjoy. And, you know, Tarkovsky has a couple of really highly specific gifts that make him really unique as a filmmaker. One of them is his profound, detailed, patient appreciation of beauty. And to me, what Solaris is about is a man trying to come to terms with the beauty in his life, and he's always too late. The only way that he can experience any of the beauty in his life is for him to go to another world, and for that other world to bring it back for him. He can't be there in the moment. There's this gorgeous shot right in the middle, right in the beginning of the movie, where he's on this gorgeous estate of his friends, and he's standing there staring at this creek, and in the creek there's reeds, you know, washing in the water. There's a horse running around in the background. This place is beautiful. It's beautiful. And the man can only think about his dead wife. That's all he's thinking about. And the sick part is, when she was alive, he never thought about her. He never thought about her because there was something else troubling him, and because he wasn't there in the moment. And he gets sent off to this space station orbiting a planet, which is a giant brain, and it's a whole thing. It's very confusing. But it's confusing for the people studying it too. They're trying to figure out what's up with this planet, and they have a hard time doing it. And they've sort of, the people who are on this space station have sort of made their peace with the fact that they're not going to understand everything that's going on, and they're sort of taking little details and trying to analyze them and piece the whole together from its parts. And the main character, Kelvin, is a scientist, a psychologist. So he's sent over to kind of help them because they've been sending back some pretty bizarre updates. And they're not okay on Solaris, and he's going to go help them square themselves away. And it's not going to work out for him. He's gonna wind up having to deal with his own relationship with the past. And the interesting thing is, not all the characters on the station are being tied into their past by Solaris. They're being presented with other problems and other things, their own psychological challenges. And the cool thing about the movie is it doesn't really even go into detail about those. It stays focused on Kelvin's problem. And it's one that, does he get lost in it, or does he resolve it? He tries to resolve it, and I identify with that because I have a similar problem. I very easily get stuck in my head. I don't know what I've got in my life a lot of the time until I've had a chance to reflect on it in its absence. And I think I'm getting better at it. Unlike Kelvin, I meditate. I've had a couple of life lessons that maybe he got to skip as well. But, for those people who think Solaris is just this really boring, trippy 2001 clone, I really, really urge them to take a second look and be patient with the movie, because the one thing that Tarkovsky demands from his audience is openness. And he has a knack for just sitting there in the beginning of a movie and waiting for you to get on his page. A lot of those long opening shots that he loves are just like his version of him standing there crossing his arms and tapping his foot and being like, you're just not ready to watch this movie, and I'm going to sit here until you are. Which, I don't know if that's how I engage an audience. I don't think that's for me in terms of me being a filmmaker, but I like being brought into that world. I like being sort of eased into a different mindset, and Tarkovsky's very good at doing that. This is one of the longest 8-sided blogs I've done in a long time. Those are my 10 favorite movies. So we got 2001, Autumn Sonata, The Martian, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, Robocop, Hail Caesar, City Lights, Avengers, we got District 9, we got Solaris. Thank you for watching. If you guys are enjoying the 8-sided blogs, please give us a subscribe right over here. Give us a little thumbs up, or rate us a thumbs up. And quick update on Declassified is that the set is under construction. The final shooting script has been written. We expect to have the set in just about 3.5 weeks, and then we will start shooting the first episode. So there's some graphic design. There's a lot of post that's going to go in Declassified. It's not going to happen right away, but we're 6 weeks from being able to release the first episode, and then a week after week following that, we'll have one for you. Gerard's very excited to do it. Gerard Marzilli is our actor. I'm excited to do it as well, and we'll get it to you as fast as we can. Have a great evening or a day or whatever it is you guys are facing in front of you. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the show.